Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Take a moment, look around the room. So this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha seems to describe something we can't connect with. It's telling us to build a tabernacle, and we don't even use the word tabernacle today when we speak English. When someone hears tabernacle, we're thinking about a Mormon tabernacle choir. It's part of a phrase. And if we were asked to define the word tabernacle, I'm not sure many of us could. It's a word in English that has fallen into disuse. And so we read the Torah, and God says, build me a tabernacle. And right away, we're thinking, oh, so now we're going to get details of something that really doesn't speak to me. I'll just sit and listen. And we listen to it, and all those questions arise about, what are all these descriptions? We're being told to build a mishkan. It's the word in Hebrew for what it is we're going to build. And it's one of the most detailed sections in Torah we get. It's one of the longest sections filled with details about how to build this thing we no longer have. And we're calling it something we're not even sure what it means. So I'm going to use the word mishkan because mishkan is what the Torah says, and that one we can get a good hold on because the root of the word means dwell. So God is saying, build a place where I can dwell. Build me a mishkan, where my presence can be in your midst. Okay, so we're starting to unpack it a little bit. And the Parsha starts with God saying, here's how it begins. It begins with truma, and truma means a gift. And in our language today, and especially in modern Hebrew as well, it's not as clear an understanding of what a truma is, because in modern Hebrew, it'll translate as a donation. Make a donation. Except that in biblical Hebrew, that isn't what it means. It means gift. There's a difference between a gift and a donation. There's a difference in English between a gift and a donation. When we talk about a donation, we get something in return. We know I'm going to give a donation, I'm going to get something in return. And most times what I'm looking for is the tax receipt. So I'm going to give a donation, I'm going to get a tax receipt in return. I will benefit when I do my taxes. And if my donation doesn't trigger a tax receipt, then I know I'm giving a donation to something that will support the greater good, public good, because donations go to charities. Charities have objects and mandates that are for the public good. So I know that I'm giving that donation. There's going to be public good coming from it. Something is going to return to me. Something is going to actually find its way back to me. Not true with a gift. When I give a gift, I then let go of it. It is not coming back to me. I'm not getting a receipt for it. I have no idea whether you're going to use it or you're going to re-gift it. You're welcome to re-gift it. I actually gave it, and that's where it stopped. I'm not following it anywhere. And that's a huge difference in Judaism, because the Torah and the Talmud make it clear to us that when we're talking about a donation, there is an expression of my mind. I figured it out. I'll get something back. I'm actually going to wait, and I'm going to specify, and I'm going to get it back. My mind's figured it all out. But when I give a gift, that's different, because we are taught by the sages that our hands are instruments to move material things through the world. Everything we're told has its place and its moment. Not everyone, everything. Even material objects have a journey to take, and my hands are the agents to move them on that journey. So I give gifts, and when I move material things from me to someone else, it's a step in the journey. And I don't know if that person is going to re-gift it. Maybe they should, because that's another step in the journey. It's entirely different than a donation. A gift is an expression of my heart. It's an expression of my soul. It's not an expression of my mind. My mind takes a back seat when I give a gift. So the first thing God says is, now we're going to build a dwelling place for the divine presence, give gifts. And we have to understand the difference, and we have to understand what a gift is. And then God starts to talk about the ark. Here's what we're going to start with. You're going to build an Ark of the Covenant, and here's how it's going to look. And the descriptions move from the inside out. Here's what it looks on the inside, then cover it with this, cover it with that, put something on top, put the angel. It moves outward from there. And the Ark of the Covenant becomes the core, the center point of what we're going to be told, because right after we get a list. And the list is in order of how we should build this thing. It isn't a random list. I can't look at the list and say, you know what, I'll start at the bottom of the list. The last thing, I'll move my way back. It doesn't work that way. You have to go step by step, the list that was given to us. First thing we have to build is the ark. Second thing we have to build is the cover of the ark. Why? Because we are learning that we cover holy things. We cover holy things. We cover our bodies because they are holy. We cover a challah. We cover a Torah several times. We learned how to do this. Third thing, put the cherubim on top because God's voice is going to come from what you think is emptiness. So I'm learning step by step. Each thing I make, I'm learning something new. Next thing we have to make is the table, and it tells us specifically the table has to go in front of the ark. It is where you put the bread. Everyone's bringing bread, offerings of bread to the priesthood and the Levites. Put it on the table. So the table is meant to hold food. Then we're being told, now build a menorah, build a light source. Build a source that reminds you of the symbols, of the trees, of the air, of everything. Bring light and knowledge to it. And then it says, and now build walls. But this thing is mobile. They're not walls that are walls. They're actually curtains. It's cloth. And when we look at the language of it, the walls are being described as, how are we going to join those walls? The word for join is chavrot. It comes from the root chaver, companion, friend, colleague. And now the language starts to speak to us differently. Because the Torah says, how do you join those walls? Isha la'achota, every woman to her sister. We're talking about cloth, but the Torah isn't talking about cloth. The Torah is teaching us something beyond how you actually join cloth together to form a perimeter. And then it's talking about the planks of wood that are going to be used for this thing. And again, we hear it. Isha la'achota, every woman to her sister. And we're surprised by the language, what just happened. And then it talks to us about the side of the Mishkan, and it uses the word tsela. And the word tsela we know as the word rib. Except it's not talking about the rib, it's talking about the side. And that's where the rabbis got their understanding of humanity. Because in Genesis, when we were told that a woman was taken from a man, from Adam, it used the word tsela. And the rabbis say, oh, it didn't mean rib, it meant side. So building this thing is giving us insight into humanity. How is it humanity was created? How is it humanity is supposed to function? We think of Adam. We think of gender balance. And now we understand image of God, because image of God tells us equally male, equally female, side by side, joined together. All of that in the description of how to build a building. It then goes on and says, now build a curtain. And place the curtain in your space and put the ark behind the curtain. Separate your holy space. You've now created holy of holies. In other words, now we're learning how we can create holy space within holy space. Layers of holiness. Understanding it's not a list. It's not instructions about something we're never going to do anymore with a word tabernacle that we don't even know what it means. It's a blueprint. The Torah is giving us a blueprint. How do we create holy space? How would we do that? And the first thing it tells us is start at the heart and move outward. Start with the ark, move outward. Place everything you're going to place in relation to the heart, in relation to the core. Where is it sitting? How are you defining the space? How are you creating holiness within the space? And once you've created holy space, fill it. And that's when we look at the language, the odd language it was using. Because now we understand it used the language of family. It used the language of bond, chaverim. It used the language of brothers and sisters, comrades, relationships. All the construction language was the language of relationships between people. Each person extending an open hand to their neighbor, isha la'achota, every woman to her sister, holding hands. And when we think about that, we know that an open hand is an invitation for someone's hand. And when we close our hands, we are not only not inviting someone's hand, we've created a fist. So the hands stay open. And that's what the Torah was telling us. How do we create holy space? Open your hands. Invite. Each person will now be holding someone's hand and forming a protective boundary. Because humanity joined together and held each other's hands. Holiness sits inside that boundary. We defined the space. Once we learn how, we can create it anywhere. We needed this skill because we're going to lose the Mishkan and we're going to lose both temples. We need to know how to do this. So the rabbis tell us to create this space in our homes. We lost the temples, but we didn't lose the skill. How do we create holy space? The rabbis say, create it in your homes. The mezuzah will frame the doorway. Your tables become the altars on which the bread is placed. The place where we feed others, the place where we bring food, as we always did, as the Torah told us. Our bedrooms, the rabbis say, the place of our intimacy, union, and innermost bonding, the place of our family, becomes the Holy of Holies. We've defined that space. It is sacred. We are taught to listen for the voices of those around us and to listen for it in what we think are the spaces of silence, the void spaces, the things we don't pay attention to. Listen there. Listen between the words. Listen to what someone is saying, but listen to what they're not saying. Those are the skills we learned. We always have the ability to enter the numinous, enter the mystery, the Torah says. And when we look at that list again, we're inundated by numbers, the numbers of these things. How many loops, how many poles, how many attachments, how many planks, how many curtains. It's mind-boggling. But when we sit down and add up all those numbers, we get to the number 613. We get to the number of our commandments. So the message is, when God said, make a dwelling place for me, what is the structure of that dwelling place? It's our commandments. And every time we step in and enter the Mishkan, we step into the commandments. We step into the structure. Our minds won't process it all the time, but our souls will rejoice. Look where we just stepped. And then the rabbis say, do that in your home. You can. You learned how. You can do it actually anywhere. This parsha isn't ancient and meaningless. It isn't what we thought once we get past that word tabernacle. Once we move it aside and we look at the language of the Torah, we understand it's an eternal blueprint for creating holy space, a skill we were just taught, something we can all do, something we all cherish.